There are certain items that you should never buy online. You might have heard stories of cursed objects or even read about them in ancient folklore. Sometimes these stories can be dismissed as mere legends or old wives' tales. But what happens when something like this shows up at your very own doorstep? It was a rainy Tuesday evening, and our nameless narrator had just arrived home with his wife after an exhausting day at work. They had planned to relax for the rest of the evening, perhaps watch a movie or play some video games. Their 6-year-old daughter was busy playing with her toys in her room, humming cheerfully to herself. It was one of those rare days where everything was going perfectly fine, and they were all looking forward to a peaceful evening together as a family. But their peace was short-lived. As soon as they stepped out of their car, their 3-year-old daughter ran out of the front door and screamed excitedly, "Look, Daddy, a present!" In front of them on the welcome mat was a small cardboard box, too wet and soggy to tell if there was anything written on it. The rain had been pouring all day, and it looked like the box had been left out in the weather for hours. There was no return address, and it was clear that it had been soaked through and through. The couple looked at each other in confusion, wondering who could have sent it and why. They couldn't recall ordering anything online recently, and none of their friends would send them a package without an address. Still, their little girl insisted that they open it, saying, "I want to see what's inside." Her parents gave in, knowing it would be pointless to try and find the sender anyway. And besides, what could possibly be inside a waterlogged box that would need to be delivered all the way across town? As the mother cut open the tape with a pair of scissors, their daughter stood right next to her, peering over her shoulder with wide, innocent eyes. When the box finally opened, they were met with the most peculiar sight. Nestled inside was a doll. Not just any doll, though. This one seemed straight out of a horror movie. It had wide, glassy eyes that seemed to stare directly into their souls, and a smile stretched so wide it appeared almost grotesque. Its fur was damp and matted from the moisture, and it looked like it had been pulled in 1,000 different directions. Before either of the parents could react, their daughter reached inside the box and pulled the doll out. She clutched it tightly against her chest and exclaimed, "I love it already." Even though the doll was soaking wet, their daughter didn't seem to care. She hugged it close and started walking away without another word. The mother watched her go, still holding the doll, and felt a chill run down her spine. Something about that doll just didn't feel right. She called out to her daughter, "Hey, sweetie, maybe you should put the doll down for now. It's soaked wet and we don't know where it came from." But their daughter only tightened her grip on the doll and replied, "No, I want to keep her. Can we please put her in my room?" And with that, she turned and ran off down the hallway. The mother turned back to her husband, exchanging a worried look with him. She had no idea where the doll came from, but she could tell by the uneasy feeling in her gut that it was not just a random gift. Still, she knew arguing with their daughter would only make things worse. So she said to her husband, "Let's just let her be for now. I'm sure she'll get bored of it soon enough." He nodded in agreement, still trying to wrap his mind around how such a strange package ended up on their doorstep. They spent the rest of the evening trying to dry out the doll as best as they could. It took several hours, but eventually it looked presentable enough to bring into the house. By then, their daughter had already set up a little spot for it on her shelf, complete with a handmade pillow and blanket. Every now and then she would reach out and touch its fur, which still had a slight dampness to it. As the hours went by, the parents noticed that their daughter seemed to be spending more and more time with the doll. At first, it had been a fun distraction. She would talk to it, sing to it, and even read it bedtime stories. But now it seemed like she was completely obsessed. She wouldn't go to sleep without it, and whenever anyone tried to touch it, she would throw a tantrum. Her parents started to worry. Was this doll some kind of evil entity that had possessed their daughter's mind? They tried reasoning with her, telling her that it was just a doll and that she shouldn't rely on it so much. But she would always shake her head and reply, "No, you don't understand. Labubu is my friend. She'll always be with me." Days turned into weeks, and the doll became a permanent fixture in their house. Their daughter was never seen without it. The parents were starting to lose their minds, wondering why their sweet, innocent daughter had become so attached to a creepy doll. One night, the unthinkable happened. The parents were awoken in the middle of the night to what sounded like scratching coming from their daughter's room. They got out of bed and slowly walked down the hallway. As they approached their daughter's room, They could hear the scratching getting louder and more frantic. The mother knocked softly on the door and called out to their daughter, "Sweetie, are you okay? What's making that noise?" But there was no reply. The scratching suddenly stopped. The parents exchanged a worried look. They didn't know what else to do. The father slowly opened the door and stepped inside. The room was dark, illuminated only by the moonlight streaming in from the window. The parents scanned the room, trying to find the source of the noise. They checked under the bed, behind the curtains, and even inside the closet, but they couldn't find anything. Just then, the mother noticed the doll sitting on the shelf by their daughter's bed. It was in a different position than they had left it in. They both stared at it, their hearts racing. Was it the source of the noise? Had the doll somehow come to life? The father stepped closer to the shelf and peered at the doll. "I swear its grin is a little wider than I remember," he whispered. His wife nodded in agreement. They both felt a chill run down their spines. They couldn't explain it, but there was something about that doll that just didn't feel right. As they turned to leave, they heard a faint scratching sound again. It was coming from right above them. The doll was sitting on a shelf, but they were sure that it hadn't been there before. They both looked up, their eyes searching the darkness above them. In the flickering light of the moon, they could make out a pair of eyes staring back at them. The eyes were glowing red and filled with an evil, otherworldly light. The parents screamed in terror and ran out of the room. That night, neither parent could sleep. They tossed and turned in their bed, haunted by the image of the doll's glowing red eyes. They could hear their daughter sleeping soundly in her room next to them, but they couldn't help but wonder what kind of dark secret she had brought into their house. As the first rays of sunlight peeked through the curtains, they got out of bed and went to check on their daughter. To their surprise, she was sitting up in bed, the doll in her arms. "Good morning, Daddy, Mommy," she said with a bright smile. "Labubu and I had such a fun dream." The parents couldn't speak. They could see that the doll's eyes were no longer glowing red, but as they stared at its twisted grin, they knew that whatever had happened the night before was no accident. From that day on, the parents kept a close eye on their daughter and the doll. They couldn't shake the feeling that something evil was lurking inside that twisted grin. And as the weeks passed, they started to notice subtle changes in their daughter's behavior. She became more withdrawn and distant, spending more and more time alone in her room with the doll. They tried to talk to her, to reach out and help, but it was as if their daughter had become a stranger. Then one night, just as the parents were getting ready for bed, they heard a scratching sound coming from their daughter's room. Once again, they rushed to her room and burst through the door, but when they looked around, they saw that everything was in order. The doll was sitting on the shelf where they had left it, and their daughter was sleeping peacefully in her bed. Had they imagined it? Were they losing their minds? As the days went by, the scratching sounds continued to plague their nights. Each time they investigated, they found nothing. The parents became increasingly worried about their daughter, wondering if she was being haunted by something they couldn't see. Then one night, they decided to do something drastic. They packed up the doll and drove it to the nearest antique store. The owner took one look at the doll and immediately agreed to buy it from them. As soon as the doll was out of their house, the scratching sounds stopped. Finally, they could sleep in peace once again.